The silent signal. Eden's heart raced as the last of the sparks flickered out of her ship's damaged console. She had been drifting in space for days, her vessel barely holding together after a catastrophic systems failure. Her hands shook as she tried one final time to send a distress signal, anything that could reach her people. But the communication array had shorted out, and the only thing that could be heard from her ship was the eerie silence of space. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of isolation. She had never been so far from home, and even the hum of her ship's engines, which had once been so comforting, was now a distant memory. She barely remembered the sequence of events that had led her here. A mission gone wrong, a crash landing on an unknown planet, and the absence of any contact with her kind. She had been on Earth for nearly 2 weeks now, hiding in the shadows of towering trees and hills. The planet was strange, its atmosphere foreign, and the creatures that lived on it were even stranger. Eden had never imagined she would be stranded here, but now, with the cold winds of night pressing against her, she had no choice but to survive. Her mind drifted back to Luna, the companion who had been with her since the beginning of her journey. Luna's voice echoed in her mind, a soft, guiding presence, though she hadn't spoken in days. Luna's last words to her had been words of hope, but now the silence was all-consuming. Zachary had always found the hum of technology comforting. As a tech specialist working in a small lab in the mountains, he had a fascination with signals, frequencies, and the mysteries that lay within them. His days were spent tinkering with old equipment, trying to decode and understand things others might overlook. But today, something unusual caught his attention. It was faint at first, barely noticeable over the usual static he dealt with daily. A signal, but it was irregular, almost as if it was desperately trying to reach something or someone. Zachary leaned closer to his equipment, squinting at the screen. The frequency was unfamiliar, but there was something hauntingly familiar about it. He adjusted the dials, hoping to get a better read. The signal was coming from deep in the forest. He had no idea who or what it was, but it sounded like a plea, a cry for help. Probably just some interference, he muttered to himself, trying to convince his logical mind. But curiosity gnawed at him, and the signal was too specific to be dismissed. Zachary grabbed his coat, heading out the door to investigate. The forest was dense, and the walk to the signal's origin would take him over an hour. But as he ventured deeper into the trees, the signal grew stronger, urging him forward. Eden crouched behind a large rock, her body weak from days of hiding. Her only source of sustenance had been the small creatures she could catch in the woods, and even those were becoming scarcer. She had no idea how much longer she could hold on. The desperation that had clung to her for days now turned into a cry for help. Without her ship's power, without the ability to call for her people, she was completely alone. And yet in that quiet, dark moment, she heard something that felt like a response. The static of her broken communication device buzzed in her mind, a faint light of hope in a sea of despair. A human, perhaps the signal was from a human. Eden's mind raced as she tried to piece together what this could mean. Could they be hostile? Could they offer help? The possibilities were endless, but all she had was the signal, and it was growing louder. Her heart skipped a beat when she heard the crunch of footsteps nearby. Someone was coming. Zachary pushed through the dense undergrowth, following the signal's lead. His heart thudded in his chest as he finally arrived at an old, abandoned cabin deep in the forest. The signal was strongest here, pulsing like a heartbeat. He cautiously entered the cabin, scanning the room with a mix of curiosity and caution. It was dimly lit, with debris scattered on the floor. But then he saw her, a woman lying on the ground, weak and shivering. Her skin was pale, almost otherworldly in the dim light, and her eyes flickered open as she sensed his presence. Zachary took a step closer, not sure what he was about to face. But one thing was certain, the cry for help had come from her. Are you all right?" he asked softly, unsure of the situation. The woman blinked, her eyes wide in confusion, and then something strange happened. She reached out a trembling hand toward him. And in that moment, Zachary realized he wasn't just helping someone stranded on Earth. He had found something entirely different. The strange connection. The air in the cabin was thick with uncertainty as Zachary crouched beside the woman. Her pale, almost translucent skin glowed faintly in the dim light filtering through the broken windows. Her hair, long and dark, clung to her face as she struggled to sit up. She seemed disoriented, her eyes darting around the cabin as though unsure of where she was or how she had arrived there. Zachary swallowed his unease and extended a hand toward her. "Hey, it's okay," he said gently, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not going to hurt you, I just heard something, a signal, a cry for help. Are you all right?" She blinked at him, her eyes a deep, unearthly shade of violet. For a moment, they simply stared at each other as though trying to communicate without words. Then she slowly raised her hand, trembling as she pointed to her throat. Zachary's brow furrowed in confusion. Was she trying to speak? He hadn't heard anything since entering the cabin, but perhaps her voice was too weak to carry. You can't talk?" he asked, his tone soft. She shook her head faintly, then gestured to her chest, the movement slow and deliberate. A chill ran down Zachary's spine as he realized that whatever this woman was, she was far from human. The way she moved, her odd mannerisms, it was as if she were not from this world at all. He felt a strange, almost magnetic pull toward her, as though he were somehow connected to her, bound by something greater than just chance. Zachary hesitated for a moment before taking a deep breath. "All right, I'm going to get you some help. I'll bring food and water. You need to rest. You're safe here." But the woman's eyes widened, and she reached out to grasp his arm with surprising strength. She shook her head, her expression desperate. Her eyes locked onto his, a silent plea for something more. It was clear that whatever this woman had been through, it was not over yet. Zachary knelt down beside her, trying to understand. "You need to tell me what happened. What are you? How can I help?" The woman looked away, as though ashamed of something, and then pointed toward the door, her gaze lingering on the trees beyond. It was as if she were urging him to understand something that wasn't yet clear. Zachary glanced in the direction she was pointing, but saw nothing out of the ordinary, just the quiet, empty forest. A low, faint voice echoed in his mind, a soft, ethereal whisper. "Help her. She is alone. She is not from here." Zachary froze. The voice was unmistakably a woman's, but it wasn't coming from the woman sitting in front of him. It was coming from somewhere else entirely. His heart skipped a beat as he looked at her, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. She, too, seemed to sense the voice, as her eyes flickered to him with a confused expression. Did you hear that?" he asked cautiously, half expecting her to deny it. But instead, she nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a knowing sadness. "Who are you?" Zachary whispered, his breath shaky. "What are you?" The woman closed her eyes briefly, and for a moment, Zachary thought she might faint. When her eyes opened again, there was something different in them, something more purposeful. She reached out with her fingers and touched his forehead gently. A sudden warmth surged through his body, as if a connection had been established between them. He felt an overwhelming sense of calm, mixed with an eerie knowledge he couldn't explain. Then she spoke, her voice barely audible but filled with an ancient wisdom. "My name is Thera. I am not from here, I am far from home, and I am not alone." Zachary blinked, shocked by her words. She wasn't human, that much was certain. But why had she come to Earth? What was she doing here? He opened his mouth to ask more questions, but before he could, she raised a finger to her lips. "Not yet," she whispered. "Not everything can be said aloud." Before Zachary could press further, there was a loud crack from outside the cabin. Both he and Thera froze. Zachary's eyes darted to the door. He had been so focused on Thera that he hadn't heard the sound of approaching footsteps. "Someone's coming," he murmured, his heart pounding. "Stay quiet, we need to figure out who it is." Thera's expression shifted, a flash of fear crossing her face. She quickly pushed herself to her feet, her movements graceful but quick. "They cannot find me," she said, her voice urgent. "Not yet, not until I am strong enough." Zachary grabbed her arm instinctively, his mind racing. "Who is they? What's going on, Thera?" But she didn't answer. She merely nodded toward the back of the cabin, gesturing for him to follow. Without another word, she darted into the shadows at the rear of the building, her figure blending into the darkness. Zachary hesitated for a moment, his instincts pulling him in different directions. But then, with a quick glance over his shoulder, he followed her into the hidden corner of the cabin. Outside, the sound of footsteps grew louder. Zachary could feel his pulse quickening as he crouched beside Thera, who had already begun to pull the tattered curtains across the windows to obscure their presence. The tension in the air was palpable, and Zachary couldn't shake the feeling that something much larger was unfolding around him. The footsteps stopped outside the cabin, and for a moment everything was eerily still. Zachary held his breath, his heart hammering in his chest. Who were these people, and why had they come? Were they looking for Thera? A muffled voice, deep and commanding, broke the silence. I know you're in there, Thera. You can't hide forever. Zachary's blood ran cold. He glanced at Thera, whose expression had gone rigid with fear. Her eyes were wide, her lips pressed tightly together, as though she were holding back a scream. Thera took a deep breath and turned to Zachary. You must leave now, she whispered urgently. It's too dangerous for you to be here. They are not what they seem. Zachary shook his head, his confusion growing. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving you alone. Before she could protest further, the door to the cabin creaked open, and a tall figure stepped inside. The man wore a dark cloak, his features hidden in shadow. His voice was calm, but there was an undeniable menace to it. We know you're here, Thera, the man said, his tone chilling. It's time to come back with us. Thera stiffened beside Zachary. She whispered just loud enough for him to hear, Get out, go now. But Zachary didn't move. He was not about to let anyone, alien or human, take her away. In the quiet shadows, the tall figure stepped further into the cabin, his presence cold and commanding. The air between him and Zachary seemed to thicken with an unsettling energy. Thera's hand tightened around Zachary's arm and her eyes darted toward the back door, calculating her next move. She wasn't scared, at least not in the way someone might expect, but she was wary, desperate even. She had learned how to survive, but this time felt different. Thera, the man's voice was calm, almost coaxing, but there was an edge to it that made Zachary's spine tingle. You know it's time to come with us. We've given you plenty of chances. This doesn't need to get messy. Zachary's thoughts were racing. Who are these people? What does he want with Thera? His mind couldn't make sense of it, but his instincts screamed at him that this wasn't just some local search party looking for a missing person. This was something far more complex. Whatever was happening here, it had to do with the woman beside him, the woman who wasn't human. Thera's face was like stone, her lips pressed into a thin line. She knew exactly what was at stake. Zachary could feel the tension between them, the quiet understanding that she had to do something, and quickly. I'm not going with you, Thera said firmly, her voice carrying an authority that surprised Zachary. Not now, not ever. I've told you that already. The man's eyes narrowed and his lips curled into a barely perceptible sneer. You don't have a choice in this, Thera. You're coming with us, whether you want to or not. Zachary took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. Who are you? He demanded, his voice shaky but determined. Why are you after her? The man turned his gaze on Zachary, and for a moment the world seemed to freeze. There was something unsettling in his eyes, a cold, calculating intelligence that made Zachary feel like he was being dissected from the inside out. Just a concerned party, the man replied coolly, his tone never wavering. Let's not make this any more difficult than it has to be. We're not here to hurt anyone, we just want her back. But Zachary wasn't buying it. The situation was growing more dangerous with every passing second. He could tell that Thera was on edge, her entire body tense and ready to react. He needed to do something. He needed to keep her safe. You're not taking her anywhere, Zachary said, his voice low, trying to sound more confident than he felt. I won't let you. Thera glanced at him, a flicker of something in her eyes, appreciation. Relief. Zachary couldn't be sure, but she seemed to soften just for a moment. Then, without warning, she grabbed Zachary's wrist and yanked him back toward the shadows of the cabin. Stay hidden, she whispered urgently, pushing him behind a stack of old crates. Trust me, I'll handle this. Before Zachary could respond, Thera stepped out of the shadows, her posture graceful but defiant. Her eyes were locked on the man, her face impassive. She was a woman transformed, no longer the fragile creature who had appeared in the cabin, but someone powerful, someone unafraid. The man's eyes softened slightly, though his expression remained guarded. You really think you can fight me, Thera? He asked, his voice tinged with a cruel amusement. I'm giving you one last chance to come quietly. Don't make me take you by force. Zachary's breath caught in his throat. He didn't know what Thera was planning, but he knew she was about to make a move. He could feel it. Her energy was shifting, the air around her practically vibrating with intensity. No, Thera replied simply, her voice unwavering. You should have stayed away. Now you're in my way. The man's eyes flickered with something. Surprise, perhaps, or maybe it was the briefest hint of fear. But before he could react, Thera moved with incredible speed, her hand outstretched. Zachary watched in awe as a strange, shimmering light surrounded her palm, and with a sudden burst of energy, she sent a shockwave toward the man. He stumbled back, his expression morphing from arrogance to shock as the energy from Thera's attack hit him. For a split second, the room seemed to tremble with the force of it, and Zachary felt the pulse of power radiating through the air like a tangible force. The man regained his balance quickly, his face darkening with anger. "You're going to regret that," he spat, his voice low and threatening. "This isn't over, Thera." But Thera was already moving. She reached for Zachary's hand, pulling him toward the door. "We have to go now." Zachary didn't question her. He didn't have time to. The air between them was electric with urgency, and he knew they couldn't afford to waste any more time. They had to get out, and they had to get out fast. The man, now visibly enraged, reached for something on his belt, a small device, sleek and metallic. It hummed with a strange energy, and Zachary's instincts screamed that it was something dangerous. "Run," Thera hissed, her eyes flashing with resolve. She pushed him toward the back door. "I'll keep him busy." Zachary hesitated, torn between helping Thera and making sure they both escaped safely. But as he looked at her, standing her ground, her eyes fierce and unyielding, he knew she had it under control. Reluctantly, he turned and dashed for the door, pushing through the thick foliage of the forest just outside the cabin. His heart was racing as he heard the sound of movement behind him, footsteps growing fainter, but not enough to stop him from knowing they were still being pursued. The dense forest was a maze, and Zachary was disoriented. He stumbled over roots and branches as he ran, trying to keep his bearings. But he could hear Thera's footsteps behind him, swift and purposeful. She was keeping pace, even though he had no idea where she was taking them. "Where are we going?" Zachary gasped, glancing over his shoulder. Thera didn't answer immediately, but her gaze never wavered. "There's a place, an old outpost where we can hide. It's far enough from here that they won't find us easily." Zachary nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. "What's going on, Thera? Who was that guy? And what do you mean by they?" Thera's expression grew dark as she looked ahead, her focus unwavering. "They're called the Othar, a faction from my world. They've been searching for me ever since I left. I was supposed to be part of their mission, but I couldn't stay. Now they'll stop at nothing to find me." Zachary's heart clenched at the weight of her words. The Othar. The name alone carried a sense of danger, and he knew that this was only the beginning. Thera wasn't just an alien stranded on Earth. She was running from something far worse than he could have imagined. As they continued deeper into the forest, the sound of distant footsteps still echoed through the trees. They weren't alone yet, but Zachary could sense that something bigger was at play, something that would change everything. And as they neared the hidden outpost, Thera stopped, pulling him to a halt. "We have to be careful," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "The Othar aren't just after me, they're after something else, something that could destroy everything." Zachary's mind raced. What could be so dangerous? What had she brought with her? And how could he possibly protect her when everything was this complicated? Before he could voice his thoughts, the trees around them rustled, and a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. "We're not alone," Thera muttered, her body tense with readiness. Zachary could only brace himself for what was coming next. The hidden truth. The figure that emerged from the shadows was tall, cloaked in a black, flowing garment that seemed to absorb the moonlight. Zachary's heart thudded in his chest as his eyes darted to Thera. Her posture stiffened, but there was no fear in her expression, just an undeniable readiness. The figure's footsteps were silent as he moved closer, his presence suffocating in its intensity. His face was obscured by a mask, but his eyes glowed faintly beneath it, two pale orbs that pierced through the darkness, locking onto Thera with a chilling familiarity. Zachary instinctively took a step forward, his body tense, but Thera raised a hand, signaling for him to stop. Her eyes never left the masked figure as she addressed him in a tone that was both wary and cold. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly, her voice steady. "I told you to stay away." The figure cocked his head, as if amused by her defiance. His voice was low, mechanical, almost distorted, as though it were being filtered through some sort of device. "You can't escape your past, Thera. The Othar will find you no matter how far you run." Zachary's pulse quickened. The Othar again, he thought. They're after her, and it's not just about getting her back, it's something more. "I don't want any part of your war," Thera said, her voice unwavering. "I don't belong to you or your kind." The figure's eyes flickered with something, perhaps annoyance, perhaps something deeper. He took a step closer to Thera, his movements smooth, almost predatory. You never had a choice, Thera. You were never just a soldier. The Othar made you, and they'll destroy everything you care about if you don't return to them. Zachary's heart sank. He could feel the weight of Thera's struggle, the battle within her to leave behind everything she had known, everything that had shaped her. There was so much more to her than he could even begin to comprehend. "What do you want from her?" Zachary asked, his voice tight with anger and confusion. His instincts screamed that this man wasn't just an ordinary enemy. There was something more dangerous about him, something more insidious. The figure's gaze shifted to Zachary for the first time, sizing him up. He didn't seem threatened. Instead, he appeared almost amused. "And who are you, human? Do you think you can stop us? The Othar are beyond your comprehension." Zachary's chest tightened, but he stood his ground. "If it's a fight you want, I'll give it to you. But if you're just here to threaten her, then you better turn around and leave." The figure's laugh was low and hollow, echoing through the trees. "You really don't know who you're dealing with, do you?" he murmured, as if the words were meant to mock Zachary's naivete. Thera's hand shot out in an instant, and before Zachary could react, a bright, crackling surge of energy shot from her fingertips, striking the figure square in the chest. The force of the blast sent him staggering back, but he didn't fall. Instead, he straightened, his head snapping back with a sharp, eerie motion, and a low hum began to emanate from his body. Thera's eyes widened. "No," she whispered. "What is it?" Zachary asked, stepping toward her, his voice edged with panic. "What's happening?" The figure's laughter filled the space around them again, but this time it was deeper, more menacing. "You think that attack will stop me? You think you can defeat the Othar with your pathetic energy? No, Thera, you've underestimated us. You've underestimated me." The figure raised his hand, and suddenly the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. Zachary's skin prickled as if something heavy was pressing down on him. The earth beneath his feet seemed to vibrate, and he could feel a strange pull in his chest, like the ground itself was becoming unstable. The figure was channeling something powerful, something far beyond what Zachary or Thera could muster. Thera, however, didn't falter. Her eyes narrowed and she stepped in front of Zachary, her expression fierce. "You're not getting to him, not while I'm here." In an instant, she raised her hands toward the figure, and a surge of light exploded from her palms, a swirling mass of energy that twisted and crackled in the air. The light pushed against the figure's dark aura, sending waves of force that shook the surrounding trees. It was a battle of wills, light versus darkness, an elemental clash between two forces. The masked figure snarled beneath his breath, his eyes flashing with a strange, unnatural intensity. "You're more powerful than I thought, Thera, but this won't be the end. You will come back to the Othar, or you will face the consequences." Thera's energy intensified, but before she could strike again, the figure spoke one last time, his voice dark and final. "You've made a mistake, Thera. The Othar's reach is far. You may have escaped for now, but we will come for you. You can't hide forever." With that, the figure's body seemed to shimmer, blurring at the edges as he vanished into the night, leaving only an eerie silence behind him. The oppressive energy he had conjured dissipated almost as quickly as it had arrived, but the tension in the air remained, thick and suffocating. Zachary stood frozen, his mind still racing to process everything that had just happened. What was that thing? And why had it vanished so suddenly? Thera, on the other hand, was still standing tall, her face a mask of determination. "Are you all right?" Zachary finally asked, his voice trembling slightly as he took a cautious step toward her. Thera didn't immediately respond. Instead, she looked down at her hands, her brow furrowed in thought. "We're not safe yet," she said quietly, her voice tinged with regret. "The Othar will come, they never give up." Zachary felt the weight of her words settle heavily in his chest. The Othar were not just a group of hostile beings. They were an unrelenting force, and Thera's connection to them went far deeper than he could ever understand. "But what do they want from you?" Zachary asked. He couldn't fathom why they would go to such lengths to capture her, why they were so desperate. Thera wasn't just any alien, they were after something more. Thera's gaze drifted toward the distant trees, as if she were trying to peer into the future. "I don't know, Zachary, but whatever it is, it's something I can't allow them to take, something that could destroy everything I've worked for, and everything you've come to know." Zachary's mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. He was in way over his head, but he couldn't walk away from Thera now, not when the stakes were this high. "We need to find out what they're after," Zachary said, his voice firm. "We need to stop them before it's too late." Thera's eyes softened just for a moment before she nodded. You're right, but we'll need help, and we have to be careful. The Athar are everywhere and they're always watching. Zachary glanced around, his senses still on high alert. Then let's get moving. The sooner we figure this out, the sooner we can stop them. Without another word, Thera took off, her steps light but purposeful. Zachary followed close behind, both of them now bound by an unspoken agreement. Whatever was coming next, they would face it together. But as they moved deeper into the forest, an unsettling thought gnawed at Zachary's mind. What had the Athar been referring to when they mentioned destroying everything? What could Thera be hiding? And more importantly, what was it that could bring such destruction? For the first time, Zachary realized that Thera wasn't just fighting to survive. She was fighting to protect a secret far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. And the truth, he feared, was something they couldn't outrun forever. The price of secrets. The night stretched on, an endless tapestry of shadows that closed in around them like the walls of an impending storm. The distant sounds of creatures stirred in the forest, but in the quiet of their hurried pace, it was easy to forget the world outside of the tangled web of mystery they found themselves in. Zachary and Thera moved quickly, their steps synchronized, a delicate balance of urgency and caution. As they reached the edge of the forest, the towering silhouette of an old, abandoned structure emerged from the darkness. The building was little more than a decaying husk, a relic of some forgotten time. Its cracked windows reflected only the faintest glimmers of moonlight, and the walls appeared to sag under the weight of years of neglect. But there was something about it, something that felt like a refuge or maybe a trap. Zachary couldn't decide which. Thera paused just before the threshold, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. The air here was different, charged with something that Zachary couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the absence of life, it was the silence that rang louder than anything else. This is the place, Thera said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that matched the gravity of their situation. We'll be safe here for a while, but you need to understand something, Zachary. We can't stay hidden forever. Zachary nodded, feeling the anxiety gnawing at him once again. What is this place? Why are we here? Thera turned to face him, her eyes distant as she looked at the crumbling structure. This was once a safe house, a place where people like me, like my kind, could hide, heal, or regroup when things went wrong. She hesitated before continuing, her voice lower now, tinged with something darker. It's been abandoned for years, but there's something inside, something I've been keeping locked away. Zachary frowned. What is it? Thera's eyes met his, a silent warning in her gaze. I don't know if it's safe for you to know, Zachary. It's not just dangerous, it's something I've kept hidden even from myself, but the Athar want it. They want everything that's inside here. Zachary's mind raced as he absorbed her words. The Athar weren't just after Thera, they were after whatever secret she was hiding here, and if they could get their hands on it. Is it something you've been running from? Zachary asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Something you can't stop. Thera closed her eyes for a brief moment, a flicker of pain flashing across her features. In a way, yes, but it's not that simple. What's inside? It's a part of me. It's connected to my existence in a way that no one else understands. Zachary's heart ached at the vulnerability he saw in her for the first time. She was an alien, a being from another world, and yet in this moment she seemed more human than ever. She was hiding something so powerful, something that could unravel everything she had fought for, and possibly everything he cared about. We can figure this out together, Zachary said firmly, stepping closer to her. Whatever's inside, whatever it is you're hiding, I'm not leaving your side. Thera's lips twitched into a faint, sad smile. I wish I could promise you that it will be easy, but the truth is, you don't know what you're getting into. Zachary squared his shoulders. I can handle it, I've come this far. With a heavy sigh, Thera nodded, her resolve returning. She reached out to the door, pushing it open with a creak that echoed through the silence of the night. The room inside was dark and musty, the air thick with the scent of decay. Dust motes floated in the faint beams of moonlight that filtered through the cracked windows. A chill ran down Zachary's spine as he stepped inside, his senses on high alert. Stay close, Thera whispered, her voice barely audible. There are things in here, things I've sealed away. I don't know if they'll react to us being here. They moved deeper into the building, their footsteps muted by the thick layers of dust and grime. The walls were lined with shelves and cabinets, many of them broken or overturned, their contents scattered across the floor. Old, tattered papers, metal objects, and strange symbols littered the space. But it wasn't the debris that caught Zachary's attention. It was the strange markings on the walls, the faded symbols, almost like a language he couldn't recognize. His eyes followed the lines, tracing them with a sense of foreboding. "What is all this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Thera's gaze flicked to the walls, and for a moment her eyes seemed to cloud with memories she was reluctant to revisit. "It's a record of my people," she said quietly. "The Othar, they're not just conquerors. They've been manipulating us for centuries. This place. It was part of their experiments." Zachary felt a shiver run down his spine. Experiments. Thera nodded. "They've always believed that the key to their power lies in harnessing the energy of our kind, my kind. But the energy that's inside us, it's not something they understand. And when they tried to control it, they nearly destroyed us all." Zachary's mind was reeling as he tried to digest everything Thera was saying. The Othar had been experimenting on her kind, and now they were after whatever was hidden here. "You can't let them take whatever's here," Zachary said, his voice resolute. "You can't let them win." "I won't," Thera replied, her eyes hardening with determination. "But I need you to understand something, Zachary. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about keeping something from falling into their hands, something that could destroy entire worlds." They moved toward the back of the room, where a large, metallic door stood. The door was older than the rest of the building, and there was an ominous hum emanating from it. Thera reached out and placed her hand on the door, her fingers glowing with a faint energy. The hum grew louder, and the door slowly began to open, revealing a small, darkened room beyond. Inside, there was a pedestal, and on it rested a small, glowing object, an orb of some kind. The light it emitted was subtle, but its presence was powerful, almost as if the entire room centered around it. Zachary's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the orb. It seemed alive. The energy radiating from it was palpable, and his instincts screamed at him to be cautious. Thera stepped forward, her hand hovering just above the orb. "This is it," she whispered. "This is what they're after." Zachary's heart pounded in his chest. "What is it?" Thera looked at him, her face a mixture of awe and fear. "It's the source of our power, the key to everything. It's not just an object, it's a piece of what we are, what I am. And if they get their hands on it, they will have the power to control everything, to control me, to control you." Zachary took a step closer, his eyes never leaving the orb. The weight of the situation was beginning to sink in. This wasn't just about an alien woman hiding from her past. This was about an ancient, catastrophic power that could shape the future of both their worlds. "We need to keep it safe," Zachary said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. "We need to protect it at all costs." Thera nodded, her gaze fixed on the orb. "I know, but I'm not sure we can." The sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the distance, distant but unmistakable. Zachary tensed, his heart skipping a beat. "They're coming," Thera murmured. The Othar were closing in. Time was running out. Zachary took a deep breath, his mind racing. The only choice now was to fight. They couldn't let the Othar win. "Then let's make sure they don't take it," Zachary said, a fire igniting in his chest. And with that, they prepared for the fight of their lives.